Working Drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everybody, this is Matthew Krause, and you are listening to the podcast Working Drummer. Today my guest is master guitar player Rob McNelley. For close to a decade, Rob has been building up his reputation as the go-to guitar player in the Nashville Sessions scene, recording with artists like Buddy Guy, Lady Antebellum, Bob Seger, and Carrie Underwood, just to name a few. Shortly after his move to Nashville from Columbus, Ohio, Rob spent many years on the road with the legendary Delbert McClinton. In recent years, Rob was awarded the ACM Guitar Player of the Year. To find out more about this podcast and other podcasts that we've recorded, go to workingdrummer.net. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also subscribe to this podcast by going to iTunes, and while you're there, leave us a comment and give us a rating. It always helps us grow. This podcast is sponsored by Sakai Drums. You know the Sakai sound, now get to know the Sakai name. Trusted around the world for almost 100 years, Sakai's devotion to craftsmanship and passion in creating the world's best quality drums is unmatched. Handcrafted in Osaka, Japan, Sakai offers the most versatile drums, from the Trilogy Vintage Series to the modern Almighty Birch recording kit, each boasting a distinct sound and feel. Go to SakaiDrums.com to learn why studio legends Eddie Bayers and the Smashing Pumpkins, Jimmy Chamberlin, and Tedeschi Trucks band J.J. Johnson and Tyler Greenwell choose Sakai. Elevate your sound with Sakai. SakaiDrums.com. So here we go. Here is guitarist Rob McNelley. You worked with Delbert McClinton for
about 8 years.
Okay.
It was It came along at a time where I had been doing a bunch of, I say a bunch. I mean, I've been doing enough country music touring.
Yeah.
For different acts that...
was Leanne Womack?
Leanne Womack was one of them.
I love her.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
And actually, I went directly from her gig to his. Her tour was winding down, and what had happened was I was filling in at times for Todd Sharp, who was Delbert's guitar player before me. Great player, good friend of mine, and he started asking me to do Delbert's fly dates. It was after 9/11, and he didn't want to fly anymore.
Oh, really? That was the reason?
Went through. Yeah, he kind of went through a little period of I don't want to do the fly dates. I just not into the new security thing and he had a side business. He has a side business going building amps and doing amp repair. So he has something else that he was, Anyway, he started getting me to sub the Delbert gig, and so I would do that when he didn't want to fly or whatever. And then Leanne's tour was winding down, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I was just like, oh gosh, this tour's over in a couple weeks. I don't even have anything lined up. Starting to get a little bit worried about it. And like 4 days before the tour ended, Delbert called me and said, hey, Todd's not going to do the gig anymore. He doesn't, we want you to come and play full time. And can you start next week? And I said, yes. And I literally got off the tour bus with Leanne, pulled my amp off the bus, and 2 days later put it on Delbert's bus.
Yeah. Did you know much about his music? Or?
Yeah, I did. I'd been a fan. I didn't know all of it. I mean, he's been recording since the 60s basically, and there's a huge catalog.
Right. And what kind of, what was the gig like? So I take it when you got on the bus and probably on stage, it's the first time you had a chance to meet a lot of these people.
Well, yes, and even Delbert. I mean, the first gig that I subbed for Todd was like a year before that, and it was in Denver, Colorado, and I'd never actually met Delbert. And I remember flying out there, or busing. We bussed out there, and Delbert was flying out there to meet us. And and so I bust out there, and so I got to meet everybody in the band. I knew some of them. I knew a couple of them, and we all kind of knew of each other a little bit. You know, I'm guessing because I mean a lot of those names were familiar.
Sure.
And I'd seen Delbert play when he would play in Nashville and stuff like that. And so anyway, we got out there, and I literally met Delbert 10 minutes before we went on stage. I mean, he called me like a week before the gig.
Yeah.
And he was just totally trusting Todd to find the sub for this gig.
Yeah. And
he called me, and it was like a 2-minute conversation. He was like, so I guess you're playing with me next week. And I'm like, yeah, is that still good? You know? And he's like, yeah, has anybody sent you any material yet? And I'm like, no. And so he, oh well, okay. I'll call Todd and tell him to get you a CD. It's like, okay. And he goes, well, all right. And that was the conversation.
Yeah.
And then when I don't think he expected much. I think he thought, let's just get through this. And when he came on the bus and took one look at me, I think I don't know. I get the feeling he sized me up pretty quickly and was like, oh well, hopefully he'll know the chords to the songs or something.
Did you guys ever have that conversation later?
No, I never.
Really?
No, but see what happened was we went out on stage and I did, and Delbert doesn't use a set list, so I didn't even really know what he was going to play.
Okay.
And a lot of times with a sub, he'll stick to more of the obvious stuff that he might play, but halfway through the show, he may throw a total curveball, and he did.
Yeah.
I mean, there were things that happened like, backing up, like after like the third song, there was like a pretty substantial guitar solo in the middle of this one song, and he just kind of pointed at me, and he started walking away from me on stage, like, okay, let's see what that. Well, I started playing.
Yeah.
And he turned. I remember this. Him turning back around and really listening to me play.
Yeah.
And at the end of that solo, he came over. I'll never forget this because it's just one of the things that made me feel really good. And he just came over and grabbed my face with both his hands and gave me a big old kiss right on stage. And then from there on, the rest of the show was easy. And then he started throwing curveballs at me like, okay, we're going to do this song. Did they send you this one?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it starts with you. What key do we do this in? Somebody's like, oh, G.
But the trust had been established.
Yeah. And he's like, all right, it starts with you. And I'm like, well, what kind of thing is it? He's like, it's this rock thing. And he starts grunting like a kind of a groove. And then he just started counting.
Yeah.
And so I just, after 4, just started playing something. And then the band kind of kicked in. And then we all played the song. It was just, everybody's holding up their hands for the different chords.
Right.
I mean, and that's how it was for the next 8 years. There was never a set list. We played the songs differently all the time, and it was really a great experience.
And does that, like, now your expectation, every gig, every situation that you work with, you're expecting this validation by a big kiss and grab the face, so you know that you've done the, I don't know honey, how was the session today? I don't know. They said it sounded good, but I didn't. Nobody kissed me. I didn't.
Yeah, right. Well, no, Matt. Everybody kisses me. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
My notes just blew away because we are outside. It is beautiful outside.
Yeah, it's nice out here.
So we're out on the porch. If you hear the bugs and everything, that's what you're hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, those aren't percussion sounds or anything like that. I want to jump around a bit.
Okay.
I want to talk about kind of what. So that was, when did you leave Delbert?
Well, I didn't actually leave. In 2000, somewhere in 2010, we were playing less and less. And one of the things about Delbert is that he used to work so much that he would just keep the band on salary.
Yeah.
So, but as he started playing less and less, it allowed me to be in town more. And somewhere in the mid, like probably 2006 or so, somewhere in there, I started getting hired to do session work here in Nashville on the days off, and that just kind of kept growing and growing and growing, and it was starting to get to the point where two things happened. He was playing less and less. It didn't make sense to keep a band on salary anymore. And which I totally understood, and then my session work was starting to really kick into gear to the point where now I was having to sub the gig a fair amount. And he when it was coming to a point of like I was trying to find the right time to sit down and talk to him and say, hey, am I burdening you too much when I have to sub the gig out as often as I am? And then he kind of just said, well, I have to take everybody off salary, I hate that,
It seemed like he really understood where you were coming from.
I never got to say that, because once he took that out of the equation, then it was like, I don't remember what happened from that point. It seemed like there was a little bit of a period of where everybody played whatever gigs they could for Delbert and tried to hang in there. But obviously everybody was looking for things that were more to keep them busier.
Do you still play with him at all? I mean,
I don't. I did play with him a few months ago at a benefit. It was a lot of fun to see him again and do that. But I more run into him around town, and and we might sit and talk for a few minutes or whatever. Typically Monday through Friday I'm doing sessions in different studios around town with all kinds of different people, and that can range from demos to records. Kind of keep myself open Monday through Friday from 10 in the morning till 9 at night. That's how sessions work around here.
Right.
For those that don't know.
And you talk about records or a master session.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Is there something significant about a demo compared to a master session that could be explained?
Okay, well, like a demo session in Nashville, all the session blocks are 3 hours. Like the session schedule is like 10 to 1, and they call that a 10 o'clock session. They just say 10 to or 6, and what that means is like on any given day you've got 10 to 1 with an hour break, and then 2 to 5 with another hour break, and then 6 to 9. Now, that may not be for all the same people. You may be going to 3 different studios that day and working on 3 totally different things or whatever. Any combination of that. And then there are demo sessions, which are basically songwriters here in town are demoing the songs that they want to pitch to producers, right? And they're usually published writers with publishing deals who have a budget to do these sessions.
Sure.
And then, so that's in that context, or in a demo session, the goal is to do 5 songs in 3 hours.
Yeah.
So it moves very fast. They break it down to roughly 35 minutes a song, and that is getting the track and the overdubs. And for a guitar player, that's usually 2 or 3 guitar parts plus a guitar solo. So that has to happen in 35 minutes from hearing the song for the first time, with a chart in hand, to completing the song,
And I know for drums, you get the basic track down.
Yes.
And then while they're doing multiple passes, you're grabbing the tambourine, shaker, whatever.
Yes.
But I know on
or doing programming now.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So it's, on one hand, it could be less than responsibility than the guitar, and on the other hand, it could be more.
Yeah, exactly. In the current state of the sounds in modern country music, with programming coming into the picture, drummers are there's a lot more weight on the drummer now on a demo session, or a record date or whatever.
And that's the pace. I mean, in a nutshell.
That's demo, as far as a demo session.
They're trying to you're getting as much as you can in a very quick amount of time. So I know we were going to try and get together tomorrow. You had a little bit of free time.
Yes,
but then they said, man, we've got you booked for a master session.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. How does the pace differ? Now, I know the pay is different. You know?
Yeah, the pay is ironically the workload is heavier in the demo session,
Right.
and you get paid half the money. You know, and in a master session you can range. I mean, those are even getting a little bit crowded now because budgets are getting smaller. Like sometimes in that 3 hours on a master session, you're doing you can be doing as many as one song for the session if the budget allows, or three, you know, or two, you know, two. Maybe get started on a third one and take lunch break and come back in the afternoon and pick up, you know, or whatever. You know, I guess the reason for the money difference is because with a master session they actually can recoup the cost of it, so they can pay a little bit more, and they want you to take more time on the song. Right. You know, there's more detail involved. You know. Right. You know.
Are there ever demos where you're like, man, I don't think we really got the bridge right, but they're like, it's fine, it'll work.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, I know that the pace is, you're being hired because of your abilities to perform 5 songs in 3 hours.
Yeah.
So the level of talent is high.
Yeah.
It's there. You know, you're there for a reason. You got called for a reason.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this has to be done within this 3 hour period.
Yes.
Where I imagine a master session, no, we missed that one note. It's got to be. We're gonna, obviously, if it's not something that could be edited quickly or whatever. Yeah. So there's maybe more attention to detail.
There is. Yeah. Well, in the demo, though, now, you know, there'll never be wrong notes on a demo session. That wouldn't fly. Yeah. But maybe they might, like, maybe you certain things like, hey, I played the first chorus. I figured out what I wanted to do by the second chorus and the choruses, and they'll just be like, well, we'll just fly your part from the second chorus up to the first chorus if it's a demo, because that saves time. But
so take that example. But on a master session, how would that play out?
On a master session, you'd play it every time. You'd just go back and punch in and perform the song, or you know, or take a whole nother pass. I mean, I like to do that rather than punch in if we got the time, because I feel like another thing that I do a lot is tracks for people from home. Like they'll send me files and I've gotten into this thing where I try to, it's just an exercise for myself, really, because there's no way they can tell that I'm doing this really on the other end, but I try to play the song completely through. Like there's no, like I don't even have punching in as an option, just because I want to keep my performance skills very high. You know, so when I do tracks at home, so even on a master, if I will play the pad, my philosophy is you shouldn't move on until the drums and bass, the drummer in the rhythm section has said that they've got their pass. Yeah. I kind of think that everyone in the band should be playing until the drummer says, I've got the pass. It's okay to play to his pass if you want to go back and do some stuff, but I don't know, it's probably just in my head. I feel it's important to play with whatever the drummer played on that pass, and then consider that the master pass, even if you nailed it 3 times before the drummer did. Right. You know what I mean? Or the producer kept making changes on the rhythm section end. Yeah. How's that going to sound when they make a change to what the bass player and the drummer did, and you're already stacking parts on top of something from 3 passes ago that they weren't doing that part. Sure. I kind of think
it could be significant.
Those are the I think a producer with a really good vision feels that way too. You know, I notice, you know, I think, you know, it's easy to edit things in the box. I know that. And a lot of times you cannot tell. But
do you think that comes from your experience live, spending years on the road?
It totally does. And I've worked on a lot of records where we were going to tape. Yeah. And everybody has to get the pass at the same time. I did a Jewel record a couple years ago where we all set up in the room and all the instruments were bleeding into each other, you know, I had a small amp, and it was getting a little bit into the and if one person didn't get the if one person made a mistake, we had to do it over again.
Yeah.
And I never want to get to the point where I can't do where that's uncomfortable for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my philosophy.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people feel differently. I don't know.
Is there something like outside your playing, like say that type of work ethic that producers and people that hire you, are you noticing them taking note of that type of philosophy, the work ethic, that approach, that care? I
think there's two different styles. We're at a point in music making history where the technology allows it to be two different schools of thought now.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of the younger producers are coming up from building tracks all on their own.
Yep.
And they're really good at playing a lot of different instruments, and serviceable a lot, maybe, or so they can sit in the room in the course of 5 hours and totally play everything on this track and get it right by flying things, editing things, and chopping it and doing whatever, and that has a sound.
Yeah.
And we've got that sound on the radio now.
Right.
And a lot of people hear that. It's kind of like auto-tune on vocals. There's people that sing like they're auto-tuned now because they've grown up listening to singers that have been auto-tuned.
Yeah.
So I find when I work with younger producers, a lot of times the game there is that they want options. So they want you to just play a bunch of passes down of whatever parts you can think of, even if they're clashing at the time, or they'll want 6 or 7 parts, and then they'll go in later and just start editing things together and chopping it up and making it into something that maybe no one would have played naturally, but it sounds cool and it's pop music, so it becomes a hook.
Right.
And it wasn't played that way maybe, or whatever. But the older producers, the guys that have been around a long time, they want you to be able to perform the past. They're more about that, it seems like. So it's just, it depends on who I'm working for, you know?
Yeah. Is there something about a drummer in the studio that you like to hear?
Well, I think that's still a mystery to me. And it's weird because my playing is so drummer dependent.
Interesting.
I cannot play if I'm not jiving. I can't perform what I want to do if it's not coming from the rhythm section first. I think every record really sounds like the drummer that's on it. I think the drummer is the most important thing on every record.
Sure.
And you can tell. I mean, okay, like for example, I've worked with Lady Antebellum through Chad Cromwell was the drummer. Then when they switched producers to Nathan Chapman, it was Shannon Forrest. And I had this conversation with Nathan.
Yeah.
When we started on that record, he said, he echoed these sentiments. He put it into the words of the sound of the record is always what drummer you use. The beginning Lady A records sound like Chad Cromwell's playing. This record sounds like Shannon Forrest. But but all of them had successful singles off of them.
Yeah.
But it's really true. I mean, you need. I don't know what it is. There's just I can get along with like I love the Black Keys drummer, and admittedly he doesn't consider himself a drummer. Ringo Starr may not be a drummer's drummer to a lot of people. I beg to differ. I grew up listening to him, and but by today's standards, like somebody like that coming in and playing without a click and playing, on a pop record now. I don't know what it is. I just have to clue into whatever the drummer brings to the table that's special.
Well, let me ask you this: how do you set your mix up? And do you have it like a consistent thing, or?
I want to hear everything.
some people, they want to hear more of something else. So
no,
telling.
I'm not a great mixer, but I try to get it to, and it took me a long time to learn how to do it. Actually, it's like the hardest thing about being a session player for me is getting your headphone mix right. And I try and make it sound like a record as much as possible. If somebody, I want to hear the vocalist, even if they're having, if they're just they don't even know the song and they're like doing a scratch and they don't even know. I need to know where they're singing, even if it's they're fumbling through it right now or whatever. Like when I do sessions at the house, it's the same way. People will say, "What do you want me to send you? A mix with the vocal down?" And I'm always baffled by that. I'm like, "No, we're trying to make the vocal work. That's what everybody out in the world wants to hear."
That's the first thing that they hear, especially for the larger audience, which are non-musicians. There's a tier in which people digest music, and it's usually from the top down, the melody, the vocal part.
The lyrics or whatever, And so I always want to hear, if it's a part that's important enough to be in there, I want to hear it because I need to complement it. Yeah. I don't want to play to something that I don't know. Well,
you're also as somebody that's playing rhythm, but you're also creating a melodic and harmonic structure.
Exactly.
Different than a drummer.
Exactly.
Is that I can imagine that the vocal part has got to be super important. I couldn't imagine that not being important enough to hear.
Yeah.
I think maybe the intent of the question was to try and find out if there's something from your mix that would be telling as far as how you connect with the rhythm section.
Oh, okay.
I know that even for some drummers, they will find a level of the click in relation to the hi-hat. Or I've done sessions where sometimes I'll connect with a certain musician in the group if we're all laying down at the same time. That, for example, acoustic guitar, I want to make sure that I'm totally locked in with him, so that frequency between the hi-hat and him, we're there. Yeah. It's not always necessarily the bass player, it's got to be something that's creating more rhythmic counterpoint that is going to create a larger groove, but also the level of certain things that's going to get the performance. But I know what you're saying, because even if I'm running an in-ear mix for a live thing, I want everything. And I don't know how many engineers they'll say, "Well, what do you want?" I'm like, "I want everything." You like everything? You mean and the rhythm and the backing vocals? Yes, I want everything.
Yeah, I need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, and okay, so let me answer the question more to your point. I'm always in. I feel like I'm 99% of the time always in the room with the drums. Okay. So I can feel the drums. Now I use these really heavily isolated phones so that I can.
Do you bring your own phones?
I do. I have these Ultra phones. And they really do a great job of blocking out the volume, so I can listen at low volume, because I actually think I hear more when I can turn down the headphones, and but I can feel the drums happening, and subconsciously, even though I'm reading a chart, out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching the drummer's hi-hat hand. And or the kick head moving a little bit when they hit it, and I find that I get my best rhythm passes with the drummer just because I'm feeling that energy and hearing it in the headphones while he's doing it. I can see the body language. There's a subliminal thing that goes away when I'm overdubbing to somebody and not watching them play.
Right.
So I mean, it probably is all. It's probably I like to hear the drums as much as I'm feeling them, so I will actually turn the 2 mix up more than everything else.
Right.
And all the individual channels, I barely crack them open.
Yeah.
First guy that I played with on a session that I really noticed that I really played well with was Greg Morrow. And he just happened to be probably one of the guys I played with very early on, luckily. His ability to get right to the essence of a song is uncanny, and I love when I can work with him.
What do you mean by that? Like the part or the feel?
The part, the feel, the everything. I mean, first of all, that guy is. I'm convinced he owns every record that's ever come out because his vinyl collection is insane, and he's way into it, listening to music, you know. But he, you know, there's just a confidence. This whole thing has to rest on the drummer's shoulders, right? And you know, I've been told, I never break this down, but I know it's probably true. I've been told that I can lean towards the back side of the beat. And some drummers really know how to make that happen without the tempo slowing down. You know what I mean? There's like a thing that happens, like they know how to place things like with a band that's doing that, or a guitar player that's doing that, where it feels
might be on the backside, but it's
energy.
not draggy.
Right, exactly. And then you know, it's, I don't know, I really can't pinpoint it, and I don't try, and I almost go out of my way to try not to be able to pinpoint these things, because it's kind of like because I can be playing later on today with a drummer who really pushes things forward and has that kind of almost a little bit of a punk rock energy going on. Right. And I can enjoy that just as much and tune into that.
Sure,
you know?
Sure, right. It has its place.
And so it's kind of like...
and that probably makes you more valuable to producers, knowing that you can work with
I think so.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, I think I love it when drummers play with hooks in mind, like Ringo did, or you know, like
composing a part.
I love that. You know, I mean, obviously, if you're playing something that's like very groove based, or something that's like just, then yeah, be funky and cool. But I love it when a drummer actually plays fills that are hooks that you sing later, or that because that's what most of the music that we're recording in Nashville is. Music everybody on the floor should be trying to play something that somebody can sing. I think.
And the drummer is no exception.
To me, it's kind of like, you know.
Yeah. You know, I always said that Kenny Aronoff was the king of that. Where, I mean, Ringo for sure, which is a perfect example, but in both those situations, if you're playing a song that Ringo or Kenny Aronoff played, there are certain fills, there's certain sections that you just have to cop those things, because it makes the song. If you don't play that breakdown in the middle of Jack and Diane, if you're covering that song, then people are like, wait a minute, what
happened? What song are they playing now?
Yeah, or so totally. And Ringo's notorious for that, and for sometimes the grief that certain clueless people have about his abilities. When they come to realize it, you realize how important that compositional contribution is. Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And there are definitely times that I've heard that from Greg and Chad as well, where, a good example is I remember listening to a song that Chad demoed that I later recorded for a record.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I totally picked up on a fill that he played that just worked so well that he played it twice.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Why not? Because it worked so well, and it's like, I have to use that. Yeah,
it becomes like a signature thing.
Yes, yeah.
That's really what we're all trying to do. Is in the context of a 3-minute song that's going to be on the radio, if you really pay attention to those songs and that kind of playing, it's all about being simple and out of the way until there's that right moment where nothing else is happening for a couple bars, and somebody has to step in and make a hook happen there. You know, I love guitar solos that are hook solos in that context. Now, you know, if you're gonna play with Tedeschi trucks or something, then play your ass off, you know, and be great at it. But even then, you know, it still sounds like somebody's singing.
Yeah, but I think that's really, and this is really useful, and it's really helpful, I think, to recognize that just because a drummer is not playing a melodic, harmonic, you know, stereotypical instrument, like, that it's still just as important and can add so much to think in those terms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is there something maybe... and please feel free to use names. No, I'm kidding. Has there been... can you cite an example of something that just kind of takes the air out of the session, the song, that maybe that emanates from the drummer, that you're like, oh, I've heard this before, and it's like... Can you pinpoint something there? Maybe give us an example. Maybe something, and maybe something that, I don't know if you can, but maybe something that you know is a typical issue that maybe drummers struggle with.
You know,
that would be helpful to know that you're afraid to tell us.
Yeah, no, I'm not afraid to say. I think this goes for any chair, but
first chair drummer.
First chair drummer. You know, but any you can usually trace it back to some sort of ego issue, or you know, when a drummer is not tapping into what the producer's looking for, or any instrument, but we're talking about drummers, so I'll just say drummers.
Sure.
So, but usually it comes down to like the producer's looking for. Let's just say a producer. This track, he's referencing, say, like, man, you know, it just needs to feel a little bit jammy like the Allman Brothers. And maybe he's got a drummer on the session that really hasn't listened to anything of the Allman Brothers too much, enough to really know how you play like that or what that really means or something, you know. But they don't want to admit it. Because there is a thing that happens when you get hired for a session. You've got to walk in the door and act like you know what's going on, sometimes when you don't. And there's a lot of players that are really, really good at going, okay, I've heard enough of that. I don't know it like I know some other styles of playing, but I've heard enough to know that I can tap into that. And then there's players that get sideswiped by a reference and aren't willing to say, hey, can we take, you know, if it's a record date, you have time to do this. Hey, can we just take 5 minutes and listen to, like, you know, and you know, a couple Allman Brothers things that you're thinking of, so that I can kind of get a mental picture of what I can do.
Have you been in situations where people have said that, you know, and it's like, yeah, cool, that's great.
Yeah.
Because I get that. Human nature would be like, uh-oh.
Yeah,
sure. I've got to
pretend. Yeah, I've got to pretend like I'm the guy for the gig.
Sure.
So then they go out on the floor, and it's just not coming together because maybe everybody else on the floor knows what we're going for, except that one person, and they aren't willing to be vulnerable enough to say, "Yeah, I can probably do that. Can you tell? I mean, are you talking about Statesboro Blues, Allman Brothers? Or are you talking about Melissa? I mean, you know, there's two different." You know, educate me on, give me more information. And a lot of times they'll just, you know, walk out there and just try and fake it, and when it's not working, it's really not working. So always be, you know, but there is a line you can cross with asking too many questions and bogging down the session too. That is almost worse. But you know, it's just like, man, if you need the producer to give you a little bit more information before you try another take and burn everybody's energy on the floor. Yeah. You know, stand up and say something. There's you can do that in a way that gets you closer to what they're after. Right.
We're all here. We're here for a common goal, and I don't want to slow anybody down, but I'm not going to hold this inside.
Yeah.
I have the ability to do it. I just need a little bit more information to go on.
Because
Everybody's history is different.
And there's so much music out there. You can't possibly have heard everything.
Right.
And, it's like, unless you're Greg Morrow. But no, I'm just kidding. But we run into that a lot with, somebody that's 20 years old and has their first record deal and is making their first record, listens to all these indie bands that maybe we've been not privy to or something.
Sure.
So it's nice to like hear them say like a name of a band,
Cage the Elephant,
or
21
whatever.
Pilots, and you're like, what?
And you're like, I always file those names away and I go find them after the session and listen to them, or on lunch break I'll go hit up Spotify and check out some of these things. Like, go, man, okay, there's some cool stuff happening here that I wouldn't have thought of. I'll tap into that side of my brain.
Right.
And I think everybody's so good. If they're getting hired for a record in this town, they're a really accomplished player.
Yeah.
It's like the NFL. You may be sitting on the bench a lot of times, but that guy sitting on the bench is a badass. I mean,
right.
So it's never an ability thing. It's usually a mindset thing that bogs the session down. I find
interesting,
like an approach or a.
Well, and maybe so somebody could be walking into a session and they have the ability, but maybe the experience doesn't allow them to have the same headspace.
That's true too. Yeah.
So because everybody had to start somewhere. I hear stories about Jeff Porcaro, like. Throwing up in the corner of the studio at one of his first sessions because he was so nervous. And you're like, it's Jeff fucking Porcaro.
Right.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But because he had to start someplace.
You do. And all your laundry is aired out in front of everybody on a session. I mean, when you're the young guy or the new guy, I went through it. Every player has gone through it. I would tell any young drummer or young player, when you get on a session, there's going to be guys in the room you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Or that you didn't know before you did that session, especially when you're starting out. The thing that's really important to remember is everybody in this room is probably really good and way more experienced than you are.
Yeah.
And there's a thing that's happening I see in a lot of young players where they try to walk in the door like they know what they're doing, and with not enough humility to just say, or ability to be humble and go, hey, saddle up to the bass player that's played on 1 million sessions at this point and say, man, okay, what should I do? And they're probably going to tell you, just play, because I got to hear what you would do first before we start changing it. And be willing to put it out there, but would be willing to make changes, even if you don't get why you're making those changes. When somebody on the other side of the glass is talking to you and asking you to make changes, make those changes.
Right.
You've got to deliver the product they want. It might not be the way you've always wanted to play that day.
Right.
But that's the ego checking at the door thing.
Yeah.
Man, I've come up with parts that I thought would be killer parts for a song, and I've even had producers ask me to change them and come up to me later and say, I want you to know that part was awesome, but I need something different out of this song.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh.
But don't expect that to happen.
Yeah. No, a lot of times they're just going to tell you to change it, and if they sense attitude off of you, guess what? You're not coming back.
Right.
And man, everybody, and it takes a while to get acclimated to the fact that some guy that's over here like that's like maybe in his 60s and still playing on records knows a whole shit ton more than you. He's forgotten more than you know. And you kind of have to be willing to accept that fact. Yeah. Look, you are new. Look, we believe in you. You wouldn't be here if we didn't.
Yeah.
But man, this is college for you right now.
Oh, I know.
And you're getting all this out of the way on demo sessions, where if you're not the greatest player in the world, already. If you're not Jeff Porcaro on a Toto record,
right,
it's okay.
yeah,
But that's the young players. Be patient
yeah,
and check your ego at the door, and listen to everybody without losing yourself in the process. That's the balance, because people are hiring you because they heard something special.
right. That's true.
Know what that is,
Right, that's true.
and then know how to do the other stuff.
yeah.
You're here to learn the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're talking about coming up with a signature part or playing the role of, a compositional role. You are being hired for what you can bring to the table. Obviously,
Yes.
your feel, your pocket, and all these different things like that. But I think as a drummer, if you can add to the composition of the
Yes.
song, then that can be your voice
Yeah.
in many ways. How about experienced players?
Experienced players. I would say experienced players, they usually, there's less advice you can give an experienced player.
Well, okay. Well, let me use me as an example. Like, I don't spend a lot of time in the studio.
Okay.
So my experience is less than someone close to my age that spends a lot of time in the studio like Nick Buda.
Okay, gotcha.
His experience is much greater than mine. But what would your advice be to me? I mean, I've been playing drums for over 30 years.
Yeah.
But my experience in the studio, so if we're focusing on that.
Wow. Wow, that's I don't know, because, okay, here's what it is. And I say this for myself too. You can get so good at what you're doing that you forget to stay open to new ideas or a new approach.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I totally do.
There's like, certain things that will work.
Yeah.
A lot of players will do that,
Yeah.
and a lot of times that is the right thing. But sometimes, a lot of times, you're working for a producer that's challenged you to do something completely opposite of what always works.
Right.
To break new ground musically some way or something. And I will see a more experienced player struggle with that more than a younger player at times, because they haven't done that before, or they don't understand. No, we're going to the chorus. Why are we getting smaller? That doesn't make sense.
Right. No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
all those things that you totally think that the arc of a song is supposed to do, but then there's this. So I think it's important for more experienced players to always be looking for something new to do as well.
Yeah.
You can, there's so many great examples of guys that already know that and do that. So I don't want to sound like I'm generalizing, but I do. If there's anything with a more experienced player, they might think, this is perfect. We're getting bigger, and the producer's going, no, I want to do this the opposite way, and they're like scratching and going, I don't know why.
Yeah.
What?
A buddy of mine hired me for a session. And he said, "Now listen, the songwriter and who's going to be producing this as well. This is for his record. He's going to ask you to do crazy things, and just be prepared." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I totally get it. I totally get it." Well, I got there, and he's like, "I don't want don't play any kick drum on this. Like, don't play at all." And I'm like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah, right.
He had a complete vision of this, but I was like, okay, but my buddy prepared me for it, and he was asking for the craziest things.
Yeah.
But I think my opportunity was presented to me because the drummer before was like, who was an experienced drummer, said, "No, that makes no sense. I can't do that. Like that. Why wouldn't I do this?"
Right.
You know, and debated him on it, and then so we're like, okay, let's get who else do you have? Oh, great. Well, let's.
Yeah.
And then, okay, before you get here, I'm just giving you a heads up. And he did. I'm glad he did.
Yeah.
And then he continued to hire me. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I walked away. How was the session, honey? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think it was fine.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I did.
Right. No, I know. You know, and I that's one of the best things about this job for me is when somebody asks me to do something really crazy that's counterintuitive to anything that you would normally do, and that's going on around you at the moment even.
Yeah.
But there's been, I've got to say, I've been pleasantly surprised at how many times I've chased this thing with somebody and then gone in the control room and listened to it where they are.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that totally works, and I would have never thought to do that. And then it's an experience you've got that you take to the next session with you, that you're like, hey, there's another. I just got deeper as a musician because of that guy, or you know, and I mean, like one of my favorite things to do with drummers is. I love podcasts. Like when you say to a drummer, like, okay, don't play any cymbals through this pass. We're gonna overdub the cymbals, and and don't do any fills. We're gonna overdub all the fills. Or you know, a lot of people have been doing that for decades, right? That's not a new thing.
Midnight Oil, Peter Gabriel.
Yeah, and it's so it's like it's nothing groundbreaking, but.
It's hard.
But when there's a young drummer on the session who's played more, like who's been on tour more, and needs the energy of those cymbals, and needs the energy of the fills, you know, and all that, you watch the challenge come into play. So it's like, no, this is a record. How you make this sound like a record is like if the groove needs to keep going while the fills are going. Well, you can't do that unless you overdub the fills, you know, and maybe, and it's fun to watch a young guy or somebody that's not accustomed to doing something like that, watch them get that, because it's like, oh wow, I've always wondered how, you know, so and so did that, you know?
And I think that goes, that adds to maybe advice to experienced players, maybe experienced players like myself who spent a lot of time on stage, has a certain approach to the instrument that contributes to the energy, and it works.
Yes.
But when you're in the studio, there's a volume, there's a way you're going to hit this.
Yes.
Everyone hear this airplane? That's my plane for tomorrow, by the way. It's just getting here. So, yeah, you can completely, you have to think differently when you're in the studio, the space in which you're working, and how much sonic space you want to take up with crashes and fills and different things like that.
Yeah.
I want people to know, I want to talk a little bit about your background.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of your musical experience, your family, your father's influence, some of those things, so they kind of get a better idea of who is this guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. They're probably listening at this point and going, why do we care about this guy? Folks, before he says all this, I don't want you to think of this as a pyramid scheme. At the end of this, there's going to be an amazing opportunity at the end of this podcast that I'm going to get you involved in.
You know, but this face cream that the samples that you brought are glorious. Can we keep the samples?
Exactly.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. Good night. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
You're from Columbus. Your dad was in a band called McGuffey Lane.
Yes.
And I know you were exposed to musicians and music in a way that a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
Don't have the opportunity to.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Especially in a place like Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe kids growing up in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean?
I know.
But yeah, it was very unique.
My kids got to have dinner with you tonight.
Hey, how about that? Now they can listen to this podcast and figure out why that was important. No, but anyway, it was the 70s and 80s. And there were a lot of, my dad was a musician, and there was a lot of like kind of hippie atmosphere in and around our house, and musicians coming in, and I didn't know who all of them were. I was too young at the time. But there was always playing going on, and a lot of partying, and a lot of really crazy things going on. But you know, Yeah, the whole, I grew up in the musician lifestyle, of the day. There was just a lot of records being spun on the turntable, and a lot of the focus around the house was a lot of music, whether my dad was writing songs, or playing guitar, trying to figure out, he was a songwriter, really. He wasn't like a, singer, so he was always writing songs. So we were always listening to things like Hank Williams or Elvis or the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all this, Allman Brothers, Stephen Stills, just a huge variety of not what was on the radio in the 80s, at the time, so like when I go to school, I would hear all my friends talking about the Police and Rush and all these type of bands, and then at home it was all about song-oriented people,
Sure.
I don't know, what's the question again? Sorry, kind of went in.
Who are you?
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Yeah.
Well, I just kind of the early influence that you were afforded.
Yeah.
For lack of a better
It was totally
word.
the songwriting thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn how to play guitar so that I could write songs. I didn't know what a guitar hero was. I didn't know why you picked up a guitar to play a guitar solo. That didn't interest me at all. I didn't think about that.
Okay.
I thought about, well, I want to know what chords go together so I can write a song as good as the Beatles. Or I want Willie Nelson or somebody
and
like
why
that.
the guitar?
Because, well, okay, this is going to make people mad, but drums was my first instrument.
Yeah.
And I was too sensitive to the sound of a snare drum in my face like that.
Guitar was my first instrument.
Yeah, okay. Well, people, I feel like I've always been kind of a rhythmically, I fall on the side of rhythm first, and then melody comes. So to me, it's all about the groove first. If that's not happening, I can't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I just wanted to play chords. I wanted to figure out how to write songs. That's what my dad was doing all the time.
Yeah.
So and there were guitar players in and out that would play cool little licks or whatever, and I'd ask them to show me what they just played, or I'd watch their fingers really close and go into my room and not come out until I figured it out.
Oh, wow.
And somehow the guitar, when I switched to guitar, there was something about the guitar, I could just find what I wanted to find.
Yeah.
It made sense to me. A lot of people pick up a guitar and you can tell it's just not natural to them. But to me, I never really took lessons. I never did any of that.
I was going to ask you about that.
It was just there were so many guitars around and musicians coming and always playing on them, and then they'd put it down, and then I'd go over and try and make it sound like they did, and a lot of times I could, just I don't know how that came about. I can't remember learning anything. It's almost that way. It's almost like I don't remember how I learned it. I just did it so much that.
Is there ever any time, like theoretically, that you're like, oh man, I wish I knew this, or have you already learned that stuff over time, not having maybe formal training as a kid?
I'll tell you when it happened in high school. When I got to high school, there was this. I could sign up for a music theory class. Yeah, I didn't even know what the hell that meant. And there was I had a really great teacher. His name was Kenneth Brenneman. He passed away a few years ago, and I signed up for this music theory course, and I was one of 3 students in the class. So it was such a small class, and I think I don't even remember who else was in the class. So I don't want to offend them if they're listening, but it instantly became about me and that teacher. I didn't notice anybody else. I was so fascinated, because my ability on the instrument at this point, now I was into like really good guitar players that actually showboated or played, you know. So I was like really into learning technique and getting, it was now, the 80s, you know. People were playing like 100 miles an hour. So so now my abilities on the instrument were way more advanced than my knowledge. Yeah. So he was now teaching me all these things that I was already doing, but now I knew why I was doing and why they worked.
Right.
You know, and I took that class for 2 years, and he without, there's a lot of language that gets used every day in the studio that because of doing that, I can interpret what somebody's saying when they're speaking. And
that's amazing. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
It was something I wasn't going to learn at home because everybody just kind of went, well, that's a D chord. Why is that a D chord? Because it's a D chord. And the next one's a G chord. Play the G chord. Okay, there you go. D and G. What else?
D, G.
What else?
Grab me another beer, boy.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it was like, you know, I was learning it all from the gut at home. And then in high school, I was finally learning.
Right.
You know.
And then you worked around Columbus.
Yeah.
A bit before Nashville. What brought you to Nashville?
You know, I was in so many bands in Columbus, and you know all the clubs that were up there, and all the musicians we all know.
Yeah, great musicians.
It's an unsung music scene. There's a really great music scene there, and you know, they were all so good to me and really nice, and taught me different things on and off stage, whatever. But I also knew at some point that I needed to get somewhere where there was an actual music industry. You know, I felt like I played all those clubs so much, and I was looking at guys that were in their 40s at the time, and I was going, nothing wrong with this.
Right.
But I want to go. I want to play. I want to play music that might be on the radio. Yeah. And I wasn't thinking I wanted to do sessions. I just wanted to go somewhere. Right. And I knew.
And here's the thing about that, if I could interject just for a second, about, you know, because I owe so much to so many musicians in Columbus.
Yeah, I do too.
To the experience that they get and the lessons that I learned. When you talk about, I want to go someplace where there's music, that I can create music that will be on the radio, that's not to say that what they were creating didn't deserve to be on the radio.
No, it didn't. It just there was nobody up there that could put it in
There's
on the
just
radio.
so many places around the country where the talent is insane.
Yeah.
And there's people being creative, and there's a myriad of reasons why not everybody lives in New York, or not every musician lives in Nashville.
Yes.
There's so many things about it, but it's like, so
yeah, you know, we're so far away from the fact that, like, now with all the technology and YouTube and blah, blah, somebody can literally become famous from their bedroom now. Yeah. In a way, but
in 1995.
But in 1995, the internet was not really a.
Put your tape decks on record.
Yeah, and so, you know, I needed to get somewhere, and you know, I had a couple buddies of ours that moved down here. Yeah. Chris Graffinino moved down here. Eric Fritsch moved down here. And within the next year, I moved down here because I started coming down and checking it out. And I had another friend of mine whose dad was the manager of McGuffey Lane, who moved down here when he was 15. When he stopped managing my dad's band, he moved down here and got an A&R job at Sony Records. And so I had that lifeline. I had somebody that I could come down, and they would take me around to, like, this is what you need to see when you come down this week. Awesome. Like the first time I came to Nashville, I rode into town and saw Keith Urban showcasing at 12th and Porter.
Jeez.
You know, before he was signed or any of that. And that was a great thing to see because, you know, here was this dude playing his ass off that nobody knew. Yeah. And his band was smoking. It was Jerry Flowers was in the band. It was, I think it was called The Ranch.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was just like I walked my first 10 minutes in that. I pulled up to 12th and Porter 10 minutes before that show, my first time in Nashville. And I walked into that show. And then later he took me to the Bluebird to see Mike Henderson play, which was a totally drastically different thing. And it was blues, which was what I was really into at the time.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, Nashville has that to offer too. It's not just country music. There's all this. Yeah. And I was instantly in love with all the musical things that were going on at that time.
Right.
You know, Steve Earle's label was going.
Oh, right.
The albums that drew me into Nashville were Sonny Landreth, Outward Bound, Steve Earle, I Feel All Right, Billy Joe Shaver. I'm trying to remember the name of that record right now. Oh, man. There was an exciting beginning of Americana kind of coming into play.
Right.
And you could go out and see these people playing at songwriter rounds or whatever. I just instantly knew I was in a place where opportunity to make a living as a musician and not playing a top 40 gig to make money, you know, and playing 4-hour club gigs all the time, you know.
Yeah.
I just knew that I needed to be here. That's why. Playing with any hero that you have is always a pleasure. Yeah. You know, and getting that booking and looking that on coming up on your calendar, it's always an uplifting thing, okay? Now, but the other part about that is the producer, Tom Hambridge, I've been working with a lot up to that point, and he finally called me for a Buddy Guy record, and he's been producing Buddy for the last few years. I was just as proud to be playing on a record that he was producing because he's my friend, and I watched him work so hard to get to this point to be producing Buddy Guy. Yeah. So there was a lot of really good things about it. Now getting to Buddy Guy, the guy's in his 70s, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff that he plays on those. He is full of fire. That guy plays his ass clean off all day long, and then he goes in the vocal booth, and I've watched him cut a vocal to a song that he doesn't really know. Yeah, and he's been at it so long, he knows exactly what he's gonna do, even if he doesn't know the song and has never heard the song. It's uncanny. I don't understand how it happens. Yeah, because he's just magic. Okay, and you know, but the coolest thing about playing with Buddy Guy that I had, the coolest experience I had was there were a lot of people stopping by the studio to kind of gurm him. Yeah. A lot of people in town that wanted to meet Buddy Guy, get a picture with him, and post it up on Facebook and stuff. And a lot of those people just kind of know that he's important and maybe don't really even know his music. That happens a lot in this business, you know. Sure. Well, he, at the end of the first record that I made with him, the end of the first or second day, I kind of went into this other auxiliary lounge in this studio. We were at Blackbird. There's several places you can go to get away.
Lost.
Yeah. and I just went in there to get a cup of coffee. He was sitting in there by himself. He kind of, I think, he was like, okay, I'm tired of meeting people today. I'm going to go find a quiet place. And I went in there and I sat down, and I didn't even sit down. I was just getting a cup of coffee, and I sensed that he wanted some privacy or alone time. Right. And so I just kind of just said, hey, man, it's been great playing with you all day, you know. And he just started telling me Muddy Waters stories. Jeez. He starts talking about all these old chess sessions that he played on.
You're like, hey, buddy, leave me alone.
Yeah, right. And so I sat down, and he talked to me for about an hour, telling me about being on the road with Muddy Waters, being at Chess Records and playing on sessions with other guys like Earl Hooker or Hubert Sumlin, or you know, there was and I started to see that there was actually a session scene at Chess Records. People don't think about that when they hear a Howlin' Wolf or Muddy Waters, but if you read the credits, it's a lot of the same guys playing on all that stuff, and they showed up for work to play on a session, you know. So, I mean, he sat there and just told me a bunch of stories, and I sat there, and I think he I hope this is why, it seemed like all day long he kept throwing out references of certain players on, oh, hey, this is kind of, we need to approach this like Fred Below is on drums and, Earl Hooker is playing rhythm guitar or something. And I knew who those people were.
Yeah.
So I hope that he kind of clued into the fact that I was not just a young kid playing on a record for some guy that I didn't really know who he was. I knew who he was. I knew what he'd done, and I knew all the people. So he knew I had an interest, and he sat, and that was so great. And the next record, the first day that I walked in, I wasn't sure if he was going to remember me because there was a few years separated.
Oh, right.
And he's somebody that gets up in their 70s that meets people all the time at shows and tours, and you don't know. I
do that now.
Yeah,
so. Right.
I do too. But I walked in and he made me feel right at home, and he was like, "Man, I'm glad to see you." I was like, "Wow, Buddy Guy just said he's glad to see me." He does he does remember me. And we got right into playing music together and made and I think, I'm not sure. I know one of those records won a Grammy, if not both of them. I can't remember.
Do you remember the drummer on
Well, Tom Hambridge is the drummer and producer on those records.
Okay.
So he plays drums.
Okay.
He produces from behind the drums, which is an interesting thing. I don't work with anybody else that does that.
Your own band.
Yeah.
Fancy. I'm trying to remember the name. The Rob McNelley band?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I'm shortening it to RMC. I'm just going to go to the initials. So I'm actually getting ready to come out with a new record.
Okay.
I'm actually going to put out 3 EPs over the next year.
Okay.
I've already recorded everything. I think I'm just going to be releasing EPs every few months, and it's the easiest way for me to do it as an independent artist. Like if I put out a whole 12-song CD or a 10-song CD, it's that much longer before I can put something else out. So I figured, hey, why don't I split these in half, and then I can release something every few months, and people don't have to invest a lot of time to listen to it. So. And we've started playing once a month here in Nashville.
Okay.
We play every first Wednesday at the Family Wash over in East Nashville.
Okay. We have listeners all over the country and actually in Europe and else in the world and elsewhere. Sorry, but is there a website or a place?
RobMcNelley.com.
Okay.
My last name is spelled McNelley. My mother gets it wrong. Jeez.
What?
No, I'm just kidding. It's hard
it's not Rand McNally. It's Rob McNally.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll have links for sure that people can go to.
And Facebook and I have a YouTube channel with some videos of me playing some.
Your
of the
MySpace
songs.
page is outdated.
Well, it's because I use the same password as LinkedIn, and I can't remember what that is, and I can't get them to email me with it. So,
I wanted to make sure, just for the sake of making sure that people know where to find your music, but also as a drummer to make sure that listeners that are drummers to go and listen to what you do, because it's great, man.
Man,
when you
thank
say
you.
It's about groove, it definitely is. It's fun, and I know that a lot of obsessed drummers will appreciate what you do and what you compose.
Oh, cool.
So,
well, I hope so.
Yeah. So please go check it out. The links will be on our show notes that you can find from your phone or wherever you're checking this stuff out.
Yeah.
But I think my kids need to be tucked in.
I got you.
And I think
I'll
we
go
have covered.
take care of that if
that'd
you
be
need
great
me to.
because they call me Uncle Dad.
Because you're going to go out and drink, right?
I've already started.
Hooters has awesome wings, man. Hooters does not have awesome wings.
Depends on what Hooters. I
don't swear to God. I've only been to Hooters like 3 or 4 times. First of all, those outfits don't look good on anybody.
Right.
And the wings are not that great.
And I'll tell you one thing about Hooters. When I actually talked
unless they're a sponsor of this show.
when I actually talked my wife into going at a Hooters after they picked me up from the airport with my young children on a Sunday afternoon. Look, let's just, actually, I like these wings. You just want to go? She's like, sure, let's just go. I'm sure it's no big deal. So Isaac's going to love this. So my 11-year-old was about 8 or 9. So we're sitting there, and so we're waiting for our food. And so let's play I Spy. Okay. So he goes first. I spy something bouncy.
That's great.
Yeah. It was the calendar behind me.
Yeah.
The picture in the calendar behind me. So, of course, Liz was like, we're never coming here again.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No.
It was awesome. So, all that being said...
You go tuck your kids in tonight. How about that?
I will do that, man.
I'll take the night off.
Yeah.
You.
Rob, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you coming here, making the trip out to my pad. And,
so good to see you.
And having dinner and
man.
Just getting caught up and stuff like that. And sharing your story, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. So there it is, everybody. A guitar player's perspective. As you can tell, Rob and I have been friends for a really long time. I had the great honor of doing a few gigs with Rob, and he is an incredible player and really inspires the rhythm section from his playing. And I think if you get a chance to check his music out, which I strongly encourage you to do so, you will understand why he is a drummer's dream to work with. Just a great feel, great pocket, and writes some incredible music to play behind. I want to check in with Zach to find out what's coming up next week. Hey, man, how's it going?
Great, man. How are you?
I'm good. Checking in with you again, seeing who you've got lined up for next week.
Next week, I'm excited about this one because for a long time I've been wanting to get a Chicago drummer on the show. And next week is my interview with Ed Breckenfeld. He's a born and bred Chicago guy, been there all his life. He's done recording and touring and with all kinds of artists out of Chicago. And he's also the author of a long-standing column in Modern Drummer called Off the Record, which was basically transcriptions of all kinds of iconic drum grooves and drum solos from rock and jazz and the pop world.
His name sounds really familiar to me, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you flip through Modern Drummer, you've probably seen his name.
Yeah. Man, that's cool. That's great. Chicago.
Yeah. I'm kind of obsessed with Chicago just as a city, So we had a cool conversation about him growing up in Chicago and what the music scene is like there, and it was great to hear about that city.
That's cool. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, man.
See ya.
Bye.
There you go. Once again, want to thank Mike Jackson for his technical assistance and making this podcast possible and making the website possible. As always, thanks for everyone's support. We really appreciate you listening and passing the word along about our podcast. So I hope to see you around. Bye-bye.